Hi. Something else that I wanted to be sure of was the doctrine of 1914, because it's such a central doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses. It's the foundation of how you can say when the faithful and discreet slave were around and became apparent. So it's so important to make sure that it was true or not. So, where did the year 1914 come from? The idea of 1914 first was brought out by a man called John Aquila Brown, who was the first one to come up with the number 2,520 years. Now that number came from, in Daniel, the prophetic dream that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had about himself being a tree that had grown from the earth right up to the heavens, but was cut down by an angel for 7 times, was held down by copper, and was allowed to regrow. Those 7 times were changed to 2,520 years with the help of the Bible Teach book, in the back, which is talking about 1914, on page 217, it says, Revelation chapter 12 verse 6 and verse 14 indicates that 3.5 times equal 1,260 days. So twice 3.5 times is 7 times, which adds up to 2,520 days. And they would transform the days into years, as oftentimes that's what happens in the Bible. I'm not reading the whole paragraph, you can read it yourself, but that is just basically where it comes from. For 1914 to work, it would have to be 2,520 years before that, which is 607 BCE. Now, what is said to have happened in 607 BCE? It was said that the Babylonians came and destroyed Jerusalem, and then held the Jews in captivity in Babylon for 70 years. Now, historical evidence doesn't show 607 BCE as being the year that Babylon did this. So where did the Bible students, and now the Jehovah's Witnesses, actually get the date 607 from? It's interesting. The date is actually from 70 years after 607 BCE, which is 537 BC, which is when the Jews were let out of captivity by the Persians and the Medes, which were led by Cyrus and Darius, which came and destroyed Babylon in 2 years before that, in 539 BCE. Now, it was then 2 years or so later that the Jews managed to get back from Babylon over to Jerusalem in order to rebuild it. So that's where Jehovah's Witnesses get the year 607 BCE from having to work back from 537. The problem is that 70 years is based on a scripture which isn't quite applied quite correctly. 70 years is actually found in Jeremiah chapter 25. It starts from verse 8, but I'm going to read from verse 11, and I'm going to read verse 11 and 12. If you want to read it in context, by all means start from verse 8. It says, And all this land will be reduced to ruins, and will become an object of horror. And these nations will have to serve the king of Babylon for 70 years. But when 70 years have been fulfilled, I will call to account the king of Babylon and that nation for their error, declares Jehovah, and I will make the land of the Chaldeans a desolate wasteland for all time. So presumably at the end of some 70 years, Jehovah will call to account the king of Babylon. So that will be when Babylon was destroyed. And it says that that was when, so 70 years before that was the time from when the nations would be in subservience to the king of Babylon. Now the thing is it doesn't actually say anywhere that it will be that the Jews particularly will be in captivity in Babylon. It actually says that it will be when the nations will have to serve the king of Babylon. So 70 years before 537 BCE was the beginning of when nations, including the Jews, had to serve the king of Babylon, which means they had to pay tax to him. That's all. It doesn't talk about captivity. Babylonians were, for want of a better word, quite anal about their dates and about being accurate. And they actually pinpoint that the year that Babylon came and destroyed Jerusalem was actually 587, possibly 586, but 587 BCE, which was 20 years after the proposed 607. Now that would make sense, because if the Jews, as the Bible often says, are a stiff-necked people, or stubborn, and they decided they didn't want to pay their tax, they were better than everyone else, it would make sense that the king of Babylon would come and destroy their city and take them into captivity. So as you see, the actual scripture in Jeremiah was misapplied. It's not talking about captivity, it's talking about subservience. Another point about the Babylonians, with how anal they are about dates and times, were that they wrote down everything that happened, and along with actually writing down details of what happened, they also wrote down when it coincided with astrology and astronomy, which means that you could say exactly when something would have happened within a year, if not less. And in that way you can prove beyond any reasonable doubt when something happened, which said it was actually 20 years after 607, being 587 BCE. Also, like another, I personally found this quite difficult as a Jehovah's Witness at the time, and I asked the elders at the time how this worked, because I could never work it out. If it's true that the Babylonians came and destroyed Jerusalem in 607 BCE, it's supposed to be in October 607 BCE, and then it said that 2,520 years later Christ would be installed as king, but along with that, coinciding with that, would be Satan being hurled to the earth to cast anarchy on the earth, which would be October 1914. Problem with that is that World War I started in July, not October. So it would mean that Satan would be cast down in October, go back in time a few months, and start, problems then. Or perhaps I've been told as well that it was because he caused World War I to happen that he was hurled down to the earth, even though this prophecy was done many years later. I mean, that doesn't coincide either. It doesn't make any real sense. So, basically, to recap, the number 2,520 years was, basically brought out of a hat, which was Daniel's interpretation of a dream, which had nothing to do with end times. It only had to do with the King Nebuchadnezzar, and that was transformed into so many years from a verse in Revelation, which was days, and then into years. But I think the most important thing to remember from all of this is there's one last verse which is crucial, really, which any organisation with end-time predictions should remember properly. And this is what Jesus said when his disciples asked him what would be the signs of his presence and of the conclusion of the system of things. We're reading in Matthew 24. And in verse 36, it says, "Concerning that day and hour nobody knows, neither the angels of the heavens nor the Son, but only the Father." It's quite clear that the whole numbers game, which people in the past have played, is of to no avail. You only get end-time doomsday predictions which don't actually go anywhere. We must realise that to serve God, we must have faith that in his due time the end will come, and it will not come when we expect it to come, because no one knows the day or the hour.